guys for joining the track. Next, we're going to have Ryan Berry and Kate Schardt present. Ryan Berry is CRO for Zappi. And Kate is the Senior Director of Global Insights and Digitization for PepsiCo. I'm actually going to let them introduce themselves because I know that they will do a much better job than me. Guys, make sure that when you do, refer to what is that disruptive technology that you have adopted, and then we'll get started. So guys, Ryan Berry and Kate Schardt.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we need to, oh, there's a little, can we get the slides up, or is there? So we're going to do a slideless presentation today. Slide 62. And to get rid of the big reveal, can we go to slide 1?
Guys, just pretend like you didn't see anything.
I actually had
Wipe your
I had
memory.
a friend of mine present at a conference recently, and he literally didn't use slides. And he's a hyper introvert, and he just sat in the middle and talked. It was really impressive. I'm not that guy. I need the slides. All right, cool. Thank you guys for joining us, particularly if you came to the last talk where there wasn't a talk. So we're going to give you like 2 talks worth of value in the next little while. And we're really excited. Hopefully you leave here with some ideas that you can bring back to your business. We have about 40 minutes or so. We're going to talk a little bit about state of people for consumers, depending on how you want to look at it. I like to look at it as people. And their impact on the world of innovation. Obviously, it's an innovation event. We're going to talk about some of the problems with the way consumer insights are being deployed in the innovation journey and process. Kate's going to share PepsiCo's journey that we've been fortunate enough to be on with them over the course of the last couple of years, and some of the specifics that they're driving in their business, as well as the wins that they've had. And then we're going to wrap it up with a few tangible steps of hopefully some actions you can bring back to your business to make sure your microphone's on. Kate,
Sorry.
why don't you introduce yourself, and
Okay.
we'll get started.
All right. Okay, I just,
Mic check, 1, 2, 1, 2.
yeah, here's the problem. My necklace is running into the microphone, so.
You got this.
Hold on, let me just move it. Because it's going to keep doing
Anybody
it.
want to create a new microphone?
Okay. There's a disruptive technology for
There
you.
you go. Oh, sorry, Julio. What's our disruptive technologies?
Oh, yes. Do you want us to share our own?
Yes, please.
Okay.
You
yeah.
can share it with your intro. I'll do it with mine.
Okay.
It's fine.
Well, so on a business front, obviously Zappi would be my disruptive one that you're going to hear about today, and I've really learned a lot about technology in the last year in this new role. On a personal front, I just started using Stitch Fix. I don't know if people are familiar with that. I kept seeing it advertised all the time on social media, and I was like, all right, I'm going to give it a whirl, and I love it. It's basically like personal shopping, and it creates a lot of preference information about you, and then you work with it says you have a personal shopper. I'm not sure if Nora really exists, but I like getting the personalized notes with the special sweater for Connecticut cold springs, which clearly we're having in New England right now with the terrible weather in Boston today. So anyway, that's me and my disruptive technology. Do you want to do your intro? Okay. So a little bit about me. I have 2 twin daughters who are turning 9 this summer and a husband. And we live in Connecticut, just outside of New York. And I work out of the purchase headquarters in New York State. And I love to travel. And my kids are old enough now where we can really get out and travel together as a family. And this is a picture of us recently in Barbados, actually. And we were doing some hiking in a rainforest, which was pretty awesome. My kids are also at this great age where they like to do stuff with us, and I am realizing as they're getting older that the amount of time for them to do stuff with us is fleeting. So this is a great shot of us actually doing a project where we put together this, I think it was like 1,500-piece puzzle over the winter. So on those cold, snowy days, we had something fun to do. I'm also a mom who has a lot of after-school activities. I got to run my twins too. My one daughter does ballet and has been doing so for about 4 years and has done the Nutcracker, and it's basically endless me learning how to create that perfect ballet bun. I never did bands. I didn't know how to do this, so that's one of my skills. So if this doesn't work out, I've got a new job. I can figure out how to create an app where you can hire me to do your ballet buns. And then on a personal front, I got to throw up the Game of Thrones, right? Can you believe we only have one left? Oh, anyway, what will I do?
Caught up that wants us to not talk about it.
I won't reveal anything. No spoiler alerts. Apparently, that's the new biggest faux pas one can make. Even mentioning that you watched a show is like a faux pas. I also read a lot, so I'm typically one of those nerds who's like reading $4 at a time. So my Kindle gets a lot of use. So that's a little bit about me personally. On a professional front, I spent the bulk of my early career at the Nielsen Company in the division formerly known as Macy's. So for all of you innovation people in the room, I'm sure you know what Macy's is, and you don't go, Macy's, what, the clothing company? No. So I cut my teeth in the innovation world on forecasting and new product evaluation and optimization. And I was in that career for quite a while, working with CPG companies, and then parlayed that into a role at PepsiCo when the Global Snacks Group was originally formed, leading up innovation for insights, and then transitioned to doing a bit of a brand role, and got to work on a lot of really cool projects, including launching Sun Bites in Mexico, which is, you'll know as Sun Chips here in the US, and we've extended that brand internationally into lots of different categories, and popcorn and nuts and stuff like that. Did some work restaging Lay's oven baked with the new pack that you can see there. That was a lot of work that we did, and also launching Red Rock Deli. And I finished that roll up about a year ago to move into Global Insights. The way we're structured is we have a center capability team that are developing kind of our best practices and best-in-class ways of doing consumer insights. And so I took on this role to head up what we were calling digitization. Had no idea what that meant. But what that's really morphed into is branded experience, which we're calling the ADA platform, which I'm going to share a bit more detail with you today. What is ADA, why we call it that, and that kind of thing. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ryan so he can introduce himself.
All right, so I have the pleasure or the curse to get to do talks at a bunch of conferences, and they're never in Boston. So I'm really pumped. I got to eat breakfast with my kids this morning and drive here, and tonight I get to drive home. And most of you, if you're not from here, you can't make fun of the Patriots because you're in my town, which is pretty cool. Like Kate, I'm a family man, and I have 3 little kids. I actually left my easy job at a big company to build a startup, and then had 3 kids in the process, which is crazy. I wouldn't recommend that, but it's been really fun. If you start to think about some of the innovations that I see from a parental perspective, my kids now have a weekly subscription that shows up to their house with activities. So it rained this weekend, and we had games, and we made a little ladybug bug catcher that, we have all these new things that we can put together, which is fascinating. And are all around dogs. I'm a dog lover. I actually used to own a business called Wicked Happy Dogs, which only makes sense in Boston. But it was essentially like an on-demand dog walking service. I chose research over that, but that is a really interesting time. I've been in the insights business my whole career. Have always kind of straddled the technology side of insights, but I think it's a really cool time to be working in this space. People rule the world, which I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about. And if you can understand people and drive that into action, you make a lot of money, you build great brands, and you delight people, which is beautiful. The insights industry is going through a lot of turmoil. And we're going to talk about what we're trying to do to drive that this afternoon. But I sit on the advisory board at Michigan State, which has one of the best master's programs in the country. So I go out every so often and teach the students about kind of what's happening in the space. I used to serve as the president here for the Insights Association. And I serve with Women in Research Group. I know I'm not a lady, but I mentor a lot of ladies who are trying to grow their careers in the space. And I'm the CRO at Zappi, as Julio said. And Zappi is a business that is really trying to solve the problem of making great insights accessible, but making it to a place where they get smarter in time. I think one of the main reasons we are growing very quickly and we've built a global business over the last couple of years isn't the fact that we have great technology, it's the fact that we have amazing people. Some of them are in the room. And it's interesting what you can do when you apply great thinking and great people on top of what software can achieve. So just a little bit about us. We have a software platform, a bunch of tools that are meant to specifically answer business questions that companies go through while they're innovating and building products and services, as well as bringing them to market. And we use technology to make the process of doing that very efficient, as well as to let the data become more robust and more viable as you go. And so we do that by kind of just making it really easy to run a project. You don't have to think about it. We use technology to take all the grunt work. So in Kate's Basie's days, there'd be like 15 phone calls to launch a concept test. Now there's 2 buttons and it takes 5 minutes, right? So there's a lot of buzzwords that I could use around this, but you're basically just letting technology take care of workflows. And then when you have the ability to turn data into insight, all of a sudden you don't have to do raw data tables and cross tabs and all that other fun stuff. You just spit out a report. And one of the things we're really focusing on is turning all the different silos of data into something that delivers more value. And we're going to talk about how we're applying that within PepsiCo later. So this presentation is important now because it used to be a world where big business would shout at consumers and buy big TV spots and mass market products, and we would just buy them. And now we buy personalized products that we click on Instagram. I've bought 3 things on Instagram in the last week. My wife's pissed at me about that, but they were so relevant to me, so I had to buy them. And it's really interesting because we demand personalization and relevance in our lives. And that's really at odds with a lot of what big business is doing. But small business and startups are disrupting markets overnight. Why? Because they can go to a farmer's market, pick up on a trend, and innovate on it very, very quickly. And it's really hard for big business to keep up. Right? So these are some kind of themes that I'm seeing a lot of. This is a show on Netflix that, using algorithms, has decided a bunch of different paths people can take to finish a TV show. I mean, you want to talk about relevance at scale, and this is unbelievable. And these other sort of products are taking advantage of massive trends. So, companies like Black Swan, what's up, Hugo in the back, are doing a great job of identifying where the world's going. And then businesses, if they're quick enough to react to them, can react and innovate very, very quickly with a hyper-personalized insight. The problem is I spend most of my time helping big business, and big business sucks at moving quickly and being nimble and playing offense at scale, right? It's very hard when you've had a legacy business with massive multinational brands, with distinctive assets and big TV campaigns and a lot of placement and front end caps to be able to say, let's see a trend and let's get to market quickly. And it's really hard to play offense when your whole business is built around a whole bunch of incumbent legacy SKUs. And there's a few reasons that I see why. We have laborious, rigorous stage gates that we have to go through. And they're really designed to make sure everything is perfect in de-risk projects, right? So we have to get a certain score, we have to go get some certain CapEx approval, and all that's designed to slow down innovation. A startup can quickly make a decision, iterate off of it, and fail. And so this is one of the reasons why I see more innovation testing from big business being about M&A deals than actual innovations that are happening in-house these days, which is quite interesting. And there's rapidly emerging trends everywhere. And I think one of the problems if you're in big business is it's hard to know what to pay attention to because you've got a lot of ants eating at your socks. And it's like, which one of these do I need to step on? Which one of these do I need to build an ant farm for? And it's really hard to determine which ones. And then I think the perfection piece, and Kate, you're going to talk quite a bit about this in a little while. I think the process of the stage gates coupled with the emerging trends are at complete odds because we're kind of trained to be perfect. Whether it's the research tools we're using or the criteria we determine to decide if we're going to put capital against a project, we're crippled with this. We cannot fail, and the fear of failing is something that's really preventing us from winning. And I think I spent a lot of time innovating at Zappi and building new products and partnering with folks at Pepsi and other brands about what we need to do. And it's funny because 5 years ago we were the disruptor in market research, and now we've got about 100 businesses that are disrupting us. Like that's how fast this happens, even in the B2B space, which is fantastic. The thing we're proud of is that we've been able to disrupt ourselves, and I think that's hard to do the bigger you get, right, is to say, ooh, that's a bad line of business, the world's going over here. But innovation used to be linear. It isn't anymore. You have a trend, you identify it, you create some ideas, you determine if the idea is good. If the idea is good, the very next thing you might need to do is determine if you can make a price point that's going to be something you can viably return on, but you might not need to do a whole bunch of package testing and naming testing and all these stage gates. You might just need to go to price point, and you know what? Based off of everything you know, price checks out, you can get it out into market. There's a person I would do business with who called it more like lily pad process versus linear stage gates, which is something I think we're really trying to think through. So I want to turn it over to Kate because we've been on a journey together. I had the pleasure of meeting Kate in her previous role as kind of a traditional insights person. And for the last year and a half, we've been creating some cool stuff, I would say, making a ton of mistakes, but also delivering a ton of value for our businesses together, but also the other businesses we partner. So I'll just turn it over to Kate. She's going to share some perspective with you guys.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I'm going to try not to crane my neck too much at the slides. Do a little slight look at the side. So I'd like to talk a little bit about sort of unpacking what Ryan was talking about in terms of the macro trends of what's facing a lot of businesses today that I don't think is new news in terms of the disruption and how do we move faster, how do we become more agile. How this translates to what we need to do at our business is really a mindset shift. How do we kind of change the way we think about the work we do, and how do we as insights professionals enable this new way of working? And I think most critically for innovation is the idea of shifting from minimizing risk to maximizing opportunity. So if you think about historically with that linear stage gate where you got one big innovation out a year, it was really risky. If you didn't get it right, you could lose your sales for the entire year. Whereas now, if we don't get to market fast enough with the right opportunities and have a portfolio approach where we have a mix of scaled, targeted channel strategies as well as incubation type of products, we're not going to have enough hits out there to actually maximize opportunity. So that's a pretty big shift in mentality that we as insights professionals have to help navigate with our business. And where that fits in, from my perspective, is really shifting from thinking about validation to thinking about learning. And this is hard because we've all been trained for most of our careers to think about validation coming from a basis perspective. That's literally what I did for 7+ years of my life, was validate and forecast. So how do we kind of get people to think beyond that, which is more learning based, which is failing fast or getting learning that could help you think differently about your outcome so that you kind of are leapfrogging rather than going through a linear process. And to build on that, another thing that we need to do from an insights perspective to enable this shift in mindset is thinking more from going from a black box to open source. And coming from the supplier side, black box is something that historically has been used to kind of create specialized IP, and it's kind of been housed behind a firewall that some magic sauce is happening where in this particular metric or in this forecast, that's how they're getting to that number. And historically, that's kind of worked because you've had these tried and true ways of creating innovation validations. Whereas nowadays, I think we're shifting much more to, we need open source, we need to move more quickly, and part of speed is understanding. People can't learn if they don't understand what you're putting in front of them. And oftentimes, insights outputs are very complex, and we'll have end users like from R&D say, explain it to me again, I don't understand it. And so you spend a lot of time just trying to get people to come along with you with, what did we learn? Well, it's a big red dot, but it's not actually red. We have more nuance than that, but how do I explain that to you? Because the output's confusing. So the idea of open source or transparency is really important for where we're headed. I would also add that's also how we're thinking today about who we partner with, because we're thinking about moving in this more direction of open source, more technology-led type of partnerships, like with Zappi and Black Swan. And kind of build, I think Ryan talked about this as well, but the idea of moving from perfection to progress is part of that journey. It's how can we get enough learning to feel confident that we can move forward fast enough to get to that output into market. It's very specific also to how we're thinking about developing this new digitized capability, which is not going to be perfect out of the gate. It's going to be better on day one, and it's going to continuously improve. And the analogy I give often to our leadership is it's like Apple. So if you think about it, when iPhone first launched, it was a much better experience than regular phones that weren't smart. But if you look at iPhone 1 versus iPhone 10, it's significantly improved since then, right? And if I gave you an iPhone 1, you'd be like, what is this? This is terrible, right? But you don't notice that change over time because it's continuously improving. So that's one of the things that we try to embed in our organization as we've moved towards this more tech-first mentality is don't expect it to be perfect out of the gate. And in fact, part of how we can get the Insights huge community to come along with this journey is that they have a role to play in terms of continuously giving feedback and helping us improve what we're doing. And then lastly, we're a very big, large organization that's a bit of a federation, so we're a lot of little, big companies that were put together to make an even bigger company. How do you move that to one source of truth and one way of doing things in a connected system? So our solution to this big problem and how we're going to enable this shift in mindset is the ADA platform that we're leading from Global Insights. So just a few things, before I move on, that I want to say about ADA. So ADA really is digital first, and we're thinking about it very much from a technological lens, but beyond that, it's also academically grounded, so we're working with partnerships with different folks like Yale. We're also looking at how we can be financially predictive. So while I'm saying learning is really important, learning can only be actionable if it's grounded to some extent by predictiveness, right? So we don't want to completely throw the baby out with the bathwater from that standpoint. And we always want to be getting smarter. So one of the things we're trying to do by saying we need a connected ecosystem is the idea that our data works more powerfully for us, that idea of we're continuing to learn. And to get to kind of the right partnerships, I think we talked about this already, but the idea of kind of tech-first partners that help us kind of get from trend, identifying those trends like with somebody like Black Swan through creation to learning and then measurement like through Zappi. So why ADA? So you're probably asking where's that name come from? Is it an acronym? We were actually trying to think of some sources of inspiration for how to name this platform and this experience so that it's not just digitization, which nobody knows what that means, right? And got really inspired by Ada Lovelace as someone who's become more prominent more recently, but has, is a historical figure. And that she was a mathematician who's also the daughter of Lord Byron, so has an interesting mix of both poetry and science. And one of the things that she was famous for, she didn't live to be very old. She kind of tragically died in her 30s. But she was doing this work with a mathematician named Charles Babbage, who had come up with this idea of using machine for calculation. And she had the genius to see it could do much more, become more of a learning algorithm to build this analytical engine, which has really inspired us at sort of the heart of what we're trying to do, to be a pioneer, to see things differently, to kind of take something useful and build it into something bigger. So that's why we named the platform Ada. In terms of where we're getting inspiration, we want to be very much for us, by us, so practitioner-led. And so what's important is that we listen to our business leaders. So here's a great quote from Kira Dilley, who's a vice president of transformation and innovation in Frito-Lay. And some of the things I would point out that she said that I think are really critical as we're thinking about the innovation space and how can we help her on her journey to enable this mindset shift. She talks about the fact that we don't just need big bets, but we need to have customer-focused innovation, incubation, and that to get to that, we need more nuanced and more nimble consumer insights. So the idea of creating a more expert-led type of approach to our tools is really the inspiration from people like Kira. How do we deliver what she needs at the heart of what we're doing? So what we're building from an innovation perspective is a full suite of tools. And to Ryan's point about it's no longer linear, what's important visually is that we're showing this not as a linear process, but instead a suite of tools that the end user can pick and choose from to allow them to answer the questions that they need to, rather than I have tool for stage gate 1, tool for stage gate 2, et cetera, which is sort of the traditional ways of doing things. Instead, really organizing around, well, what kind of questions do you have and what kind of stimuli do you have available? Are you in the early stage and you want to test concepts? Are you in a later stage and you want to test pack design, et cetera, et cetera? We've started our journey with concepts, so I'm going to share with you an example of our early concept screen tool that we have developed on Zappi. So what makes this tool really exciting is that what is different compared to a typical output from a test that you run with screening, instead of seeing red and green dots, what we get as an output is an understanding of the innovation classification. So you'll see that we've got, in this example of this project, we had a bunch of innovations we wanted to test and determine which we should prioritize and move forward. So you can see that we have some that are scaled and sustained, so those big bet opportunities, some which are classified as seed and grow. So they're targeted to specific types of consumers which we pre-identified that we wanted to evaluate these with in the survey. And then we have short-term opportunities. And the reason why that this is important is in the past, I might show red and green dots to my cross-functional partners and they'd say, okay, should we move forward or not? And that was where the discussion was. Whereas now I can show this to them and we say, okay, should we move forward and in what way? And it really shifts the conversation to, should I go with scaled distribution? Should I look for a premium channel to be targeting this innovation if it's more targeted to these consumers? And we would know from this tool the profile of who was excited for the ones in the middle. Versus short-term trial, oftentimes in the past we would not be able to see the difference between a scale and sustain and a short-term trial because they both have strong appeal, but one has less distinctiveness coming to market. So being able to pull out that short-term trial is important because sometimes we just need quick innovation, in and out distribution. So this is really the key to how we're unlocking what Kira is looking for. And the way that we're doing that, this sort of more nuanced, more nimble approach, is in traditional ways of running research, we often just would get like 150 read among Gen Pop. And that's important when you're talking about innovation. You want to talk to a broad audience, right, to understand the potential. But with the new tool that we've developed, we're getting significantly higher horsepower. So we've got 4 times as many consumers we're interviewing per concept. And that's going to enable us to look at both broad consumers as well as cut the data amongst a lot of different target groups, all of which we've databased. And that databasing is really important because in the past, you might augment a Gen Pop sample with millennials, and then you compare the scores to each other, and you're like, I don't know if that's good or bad. Whereas now we can say, okay, how did this score millennial versus millennial database? Competitive athletes versus competitive athletes, midlife women, et cetera, et cetera. And that's really critical because in this early phase of innovation development, you need to know not pass or go, but is there an opportunity here? If so, with whom? And how big is it? Should I think scaled distribution or should I think more targeted? You might be thinking too, wow, that sounds awesome. How much is that going to cost me? This is what I first started telling the marketing team about this. That's the question they said. So is it going to take forever and is it going to be really expensive? But because of the way that we smartly leverage technology with Zappi, we're able to create a tool that's very efficient. So we actually end up getting a savings from about 40 to 50% on CPI. So the return on investment for this tool is significantly better than any other kind of screening methodology that we've ever had at PepsiCo. So people are quite excited about that. And it's been a success. We launched about a year ago, and we've now scaled to 15 different markets. We've built a lot of different databases across categories. We've got over 1,200 concepts that have run through. And we've really delivered not only the ROI value, but on speed. So in developed markets, we've gone from from weeks and days-long projects to we can get results back on the platform as quickly as 48 hours. And because we designed the output to be very easy to understand, it doesn't take teams days and days to process that. They can look at it, understand it, do some crosstabs in the platform, and quickly get that to their marketing and R&D cross-functional partners. So the speed has been a big benefit on top of everything else. So the last thing I'm going to say before I turn it back over to Ryan to bring us home is that this ongoing getting smarter over time is also really critical. So in addition to, this is one great tool, awesome. Okay, well now if we start adding more tools to the platform and collect more and more data, having all of that into one centralized platform is going to enable us to start to unlock very powerful meta-analysis that we haven't been able to do before. I'm sure some of you in this room have had experiences where you see the same ideas tested more than once within your organization. Like, it happens all the time. People come up with the same ideas. It happens in innovation, right? But instead of continually wasting time going back and testing the same thing with consumers because we have no line of sight to what we've tested in the past, or if I'm in the US, what I've tested in the UK kind of thing, with this new platform, we're going to be able to really unlock what the power behind that meta-analysis and the power behind what are those drivers. So we can really get to that kind of longer-term goal of getting smarter over time. Okay, so with that, I'm going to turn you back over to Ryan.
Thank you, Kate. Kate's a tough act to follow. So I think I wanted to leave you guys with a couple of ideas to bring back. This conference is interesting because it's sort of a mixed group of R&D, innovators, insights people. So I think think about this in the context of how your relationship is with your insights team. If you're in insights, think about your relationship with product because that relationship's important. And it's a lot of where we're spending our energy is actually the creation of methodologies and betterment of technology is something we're getting pretty good at, and we're open sourcing, we're co-creating with a bunch of companies, and it's awesome. The behavior change of actually landing an innovation process that can react to trends is the thing that's the hardest, and we're spending half our energy there, half our energy on creation, which is kind of cool. So there's a couple of ideas I would leave you with. Use technology to make your day-to-day research needs efficient. Unless you're doing deep dive consumer journeys and safaris, like you don't need to spend a lot of time and money on surveys because there's a thing called technology. It makes it easy. You can do it. And then the other point is all data sources are valuable to your business. I think there's a misalignment with insights and product right now where insights is running projects and insights isn't curating consumer points of view. And that's a huge problem that I see if they're just chasing the next project. We have the ability to dummy-proof a lot of these tools to make it so that day-to-day research can be easy. Modernizing methodologies, we're going to talk a little bit about that later, but there's some specific ideas I want to get you guys thinking about, as well as getting to a place where you're not learning what you already know, but generating new insights and allowing the innovators, the creators to be creative, but also in a framework of known knowns and known trends. And I think getting to a place where we think programmatically about product development is something that big businesses have the scale, the capital, and the resources to be able to do, as long as they do it, which is something startups don't. So the first is thin slice and business question focused. That suite of solutions is only designed to answer a specific thing at a specific point in time. And because every one project is a small investment, we don't need to try to boil the ocean. It used to be you'd do a big concept test and you'd say, well, I got to get my choice model and my pricing and my package testing and my max diff all in the same survey because I'm never going to get any more money. And it's going to take 8 weeks anyway. That world's like 5 years old at this point. That doesn't exist. So just get real focused on what the job to be done is for that specific learning to help advance the process and get focused there. The next is there's a lot of times where there's briefs at the project level.
That is very 2004. I think there's an opportunity to get to programmatic where you take a step back and you say, based on all the different innovations that we're doing, what are the right cadences, what are the right solutions that we need? Do a macro level RFP and standardize on your partnerships. Getting to this ADA journey, Pepsi did like a 3-year RFP, right? Like this wasn't like a short thing. They were really diligent and said, okay, we're gonna pick a couple partners and we're gonna go quick. But day to day, their insights people aren't writing briefs, their product people are thinking about product briefs, but the research brief, which takes a bunch of time and goes to 5 vendors, is really, really, it's not gonna allow you to play offense. Once you get there, think about audiences strategically, right? Like what are the different subgroups we wanna be able to analyze? What are the cuts we're gonna need out of the data? What countries matter to do primary in? Which countries can we proxy decision making into? And then have a relationship not only between the survey metrics, but what are the attributes that you're thinking about, right? Is it premium? Is it meant for grocery? Is it meant for a subscription service? And then always come back to your systems and feed it success metrics, because what that allows you to do is to get to a place analytically where you can take the data that you bought to inform a decision and multiply the value that brings you by a lot to say, okay, what's actually driving authenticity in the premium space among millennials in the suburbs? Well, then you have a bunch of data because you've tried to innovate around that consumer space for a while, but don't go right back to the drawing board. Start with what you know. The next is a big one for me as an insights guy by trade. We sit completely fragmented from the business, and I see this happen to all of my customers, and it's upsetting to me, where like there's a whole bunch of innovation happening, and then a brief gets thrown over the fence to insights, who sits in like a different floor, and they have to really respond to it. I think with a programmatic lens on things, which is essentially just thinking systematized versus running projects, insights should sit within the functions that decision making needs to happen, so that the tools and the capabilities live within the ecosystem. I think the technology industry does this better than most. It's really funny because when I first got into Zappi after my stint with one of the big companies in the space, all the big technology companies that disrupted the world would say to me, we don't need primary research, we don't need to talk to our customers, we know them. And now they're some of our biggest customers. But what they've done better than CPG and telco and QSR and a lot of the other industries that we support is they've integrated insights completely into these functions, right? So the product team just has an insights person who's on their stand-ups, in their scrums, looking at data. And so when they're doing consumer primary research, it's not like let me go to the 7th floor and talk to the MR manager. It's like, hey, John, what do you think? It's like, oh, we got this ecosystem. We'll just run it through a test very quickly. I think that's really important. Kate talked about this a little bit. In the 80s, the tools were one size fits all. The methodologies were one size fits all, and the databases could be derived on a one size fits all basis. Beverages and snacks within PepsiCo are fundamentally different than nutrition, let alone across different businesses in the CPG space. So there's an opportunity to really calibrate what matters for your brand and your category, and then standardize around that versus assuming a one-size-fits-all metric. Now, it does require you to be pretty strategic. The next is just more of a market research thing. None of you are going to pay attention to me for another 5 minutes, so don't think consumers in your surveys are going to be spending time for more than 10 minutes. The ability to learn from people after 10, 12 minutes is exponentially worse, because they just go do something else or give you really bad information. And so one of the ways to get at that is just trying to drive mobile optimization wherever possible. From a research perspective, we're building stuff mobile first as a company, and I think it's really important. And then this is an important one. One of the things that Kate didn't mention about the methodology that we've built is we tried to think through context. Context is something that we think about, and it frames how we behave, and it allows us to process information differently than just saying, would you buy this? Any purist research person would tell you, well, I'd like to just observe people all day because it's the most natural way. But we have businesses to run, we have budgets, and we have deadlines and jobs and all that other fun stuff. Wherever possible, though, if you can just try to frame people's minds in the context that they're going to be in. If it's an ad test, try to recreate the experience of watching TV. If it's a concept test, put them in their car when they're going through an occasion that is important to your brand. Then all of a sudden you start to get to a place where, from a behavioral economics perspective, you're getting a better answer. Then the other one is, we talked about this a little bit, but the ability to actually measure success, right? You launch an innovation, it works in the Midwest, in the quick restaurant channel. That's where it works. Cool. It's not going to work at 7-Eleven, but you know that it worked in restaurants at the counter. Fantastic. Go lean in on that. But having the ability to link that back is going to allow you to do things like say, okay, when we do an avocado snack and we price it at a premium, it won't work at 7-Eleven, but if we put it at a cool, trendy deli, it'll sell like hotcakes. So now you know that there's some thematic insights that you can bring to the table that you don't need to leave in a PowerPoint deck or in the smartest person in the room's head. You can let your software take those learnings and then start to scale them so that when you start to innovate again, you go to a place of saying, all right, we have a trend. It's a new spice. What do we know about spices? What do we know about consumers and how we've actually monetized that in the past? And then you can start to create guardrails, as I said, right, to say these frameworks are where we know we're working, and then constantly refresh them, right? So as I said, 5 years ago, we were disrupting MR. 5 years ago, Unilever still owned the biggest ice cream brand in the world. Both things are not true anymore, right? So the fact is the known knowns have to be constantly refreshed. We have a customer who looks at their databases every quarter. Like they're just refreshing these things to say, what do we know? What are our competitors doing? What are we seeing on the internet, et cetera? And then really, I think one of the challenges I have for insights people, but I would also have for all of us is stop running in this circle of making decks and writing project briefs. And if you get to a place where you're setting up ecosystems, you can get to a world of, let's have a once-a-week meeting about the state of people, state of consumers, that leverages all of the data. I think you said it best this morning, rich data, right? The thick data that is true consumer understanding, Safari data versus what's on social media versus what we're learning. If you can get to a place where your insights department is curating state of people reports with leveraging all the knowledge and not chasing fire drills, then you're in a place where the decision making you're running can be consumer centric, which I think is important. So that's all we have today. We don't have any time for questions because we have some strict rules, right? We have some strict rules, but we have a booth out front. We have
3 minutes.
No, we have some strict rules. We have right. Kate and I are going to be at our booth, which is meandered around this corner for the next half hour. We'd love to share ideas with you. We also wanted to help you guys change how you're doing insights. If you become a Zappi subscription customer, we'll run a bunch of water through our pipes. We'll set you up with a benchmark. We'll get you a meta-analysis set up for success, and Julio and his team will make that happen. If you'd like to continue the conversation just intellectually, like I said, Kate and I will be at the booth, or you can shoot me an email here, and we can continue the conversation. I really appreciate all your time. The last thing I should say is tonight, since you are all in my city, we are hosting a party with my friends at Black Swan. Black Swan is a really cool company that mines all things internet, social, blogs, posts, what have you, and then turns that into meeting to spot insights and trends. We partner together to take those trends and test them, but we're also partnering tonight to throw a really fun party to get people together to just share ideas about innovation. We've got some really good food and a pretty cool live band. And the irony is where we're having the party tonight is where I used to have brunch with my wife before we had a bunch of kids, and I haven't been back there in a long time. So I'm excited to go there in this context. But if you want to come, we'd love to have you. We have a few spots left, but it'll be pretty well attended, so it'll be a good time. Thank you all for joining. Really appreciate it.
All right.
Booyah.